What's good, Internet? My name is Taxlick, and welcome back to my Raw reactions for the week of June the 20th, 2016. As always, let me know what you thought of Raw down in the comments below, and I will get along here to what I thought of this week's episode of Raw. Obviously, this entire thought process on Raw is now tainted by the fact that Roman Reigns has been suspended for wellness for 30 days, although that does not influence what's going to happen at the end of the next cycle for the next pay-per-view. I'll get into that here in a minute, but keep that in mind as I'm kind of trying to run through my thought process here on what happened on Raw and whatever else. So, Raw begins with Dean Ambrose arriving in a taxi, and oh, he almost forgets his belt, the world title, in the taxi. He's so wacky. Like, that whole wacky Dean Ambrose, I never really, liked. When they made him more dangerous and unpredictable, much more of, say, a Brian Pillman, sure, that works. But wacky face Dean Ambrose, I was never really a fan of. So, Dean Ambrose goes to the ring. I will say it is kind of strange to have a world champion that people are cheering for. It's been a little while. And the fans are certainly behind him on that, and that's fantastic. But then out comes Roman Reigns, who wants to congratulate Dean Ambrose, and Ambrose is like, I would have cashed in on you too, so what? And then, of course, the fans here start chanting at Roman Reigns, you can't wrestle, and at the time, it's like, well, that's what the fans do. Obviously, that certainly came to pass for the next 30 days. He literally can't wrestle. That's kind of funny. But I did like Roman Reigns kind of going after people that are, my age, saying, sit back and drink your beer and shut up. And, like, if they position Roman Reigns as a guy who was a heel towards adult men and a face to everybody else, like, kind of no one's done that on purpose, like, ever. So that would be hilarious. It would almost be like when Bret Hart was the Canadian hero and was, loved in Canada and around the world, but absolutely hated here in the U.S. Kind of like that. Anyway, he wants his shot, fighting champion, etc., etc. Out comes Rollins, he wants his shot, etc., etc. Out comes Shane McMahon, because obviously Steph not in the building tonight. And then we set up our main event, which is Roman versus Rollins, and the winner of that match goes on to fight Dean Ambrose at Battleground. But obviously that's not how it's going to turn out. Anyway, our first match of the evening was Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, which was they announced this match as the end of the feud for these two. And I'm like, it's a random-ass episode of Monday Night Raw. That's never going to happen. You've said how many times they are destined to fight forever, and you're not going to end the feud on a random-ass Raw. Certainly not a feud that can make you a bunch more money. Come on now. So, that being said, Sami Zayn wins with a roll-up here, and they ended up brawling. It goes to commercial. There's more brawling backstage. All, stuff that I enjoyed a lot of. I will never get tired of that. So if they're going to fight forever, that's great. But hey, they could conceivably be drafted at different shows in a couple of weeks here. So forever might not be forever. Who knows? Anyway, in that opening segment, you may have noticed there were two podiums. There was a Raw podium and a SmackDown podium. And those were literally used for one thing, and that was the glorious return of Big Johnny. John Laurinaitis was here to obviously campaign as he wanted to be the GM for SmackDown. Shane comes out and is like, I don't fucking think so. And then he runs over to the Raw podium and he's like, alright, I'll run Raw. And Shane's like, no, I'm gonna run both. And Shane's not gonna run both. But what we did have here was he kind of went, people power, and then left. That was all really funny. Like, I really enjoyed that. And then as he's left, in comes the entrance for Enzo and Cass. Enzo and Shane kind of dance around for a bit. That was amusing. They kind of bump sneakers. They're both, rocking that sneaker game. And then they come out and cut their usual promo. They kind of cut their promo on John Laurinaitis, which kind of doesn't really make the most sense in the world. Considering that, well, if you want to consider it in kayfabe, interactions, they've literally never had any interaction with John Laurinaitis. But Obviously, in real life, I'm pretty sure he's still the head of talent relations, so obviously they would have had, I don't know, it was all like, it's, I guess, kind of fourth wall, but kind of not, whatever. They're fighting the Vaudevillains, and it seems like whenever they fight the Vaudevillains, the story here is, guess what? They gave Enzo a concussion. They replay that shit in, like, slow motion again and again and again. And they, you know, pretty much easily beat the Vaudevillains, etc., etc. The only kind of note here is that they've changed their finishing move, which, for the longest time, was called the Rocket Launcher. But now, apparently, it's called the Bada Boom Shakalaka. And I feel like most of the audience is not going to get that reference. I mean, like, I grew up playing... As someone who didn't watch any basketball, I certainly grew up playing NBA Jam. That game was amazing. And certainly, things like, he's on fire, and boom, shakalaka, are ingrained, you know, in that consciousness of having played so many games of NBA Jam in my childhood. I don't think a lot of your audience, certainly the audience that's a bit younger, has that frame of reference. Because I'm pretty sure that guy doesn't announce basketball anymore. That was a long time ago. Anyway, moving on, we get AJ Styles doing some excellent heel work with the club, bringing them out to make them apologize for their actions at Money in the Bank, and then bringing out Cena to make them apologize to Cena. Of course, Cena immediately begins talking about balls because he's so preoccupied with balls. That's just John Cena. And then we get a match with Anderson versus Cena. And this literally felt like if I was having a match here in 2K16 and I had a second player and their controller was not on and I was just doing moves to them and then winning the match. That's literally what it was. Now, if you want to think about that contextually, you can think that, oh, Anderson knew that the club was going to come back down and beat up John Cena, so why even expend the energy to fight back? Just let John Cena get the easy pinfall and then lose and then beat him up. That makes sense. But in terms of wrestling, like, he literally got no offense. Even Barry Horowitz back in the day got some offense. Even the Brooklyn Brawler back in the day got a little bit. He got zero offense. And you know, you can make the argument that makes him look bad as a wrestler entirely, but if his genius plan was to have Cena get jumped anyway, then, you know, that was the plan, and it worked. He's not a good guy. He's not a bad guy. He's a suspended guy. So, obviously, the club beat down John Cena, and that was that. I guess those two are going to have a rematch at Battleground with some kind of stipulation, which obviously John Cena will win, because he's John Cena. In any feud, you get one against John Cena. Anyway, moving on, Becky Lynch backstage, and Becky Lynch kind of the female Surfer Sting at this point, where everybody that she trusts just turns on her. It is much like Sting in, like, the 80s and early 90s. And she gets attacked from behind during an interview by Natalya, who's a heel now, and that's kind of whatever. I've heard that Natalya might be leaving at the end of her contract, so I don't know. Things and stuff. The next match was Baron Corbin versus Zack Ryder. And thankfully, nowhere in this segment was Dolph Ziggler. I can only hope that feud is done with. Zack Ryder wearing some bright green trunks there, and much like most enhancement talent, he totally got in a little bit of offense and then lost to Baron Corbin. So, next match was Paige versus Charlotte, and obviously there are all kinds of things going on with Paige right now in terms of rumors and whatever the hell else is going on with her after Money in the Bank. I'll get into that in my other show later on in my career video. But she fought Charlotte here in a championship match. And there was, like, the worst interference ever from Dana Brooke, who was trying to put the foot of Charlotte on, like, under the bottom rope instead of being on the bottom rope, which is not how it works. I don't know what they're doing with Dana Brooke, but she apparently isn't very bright. And perhaps that's her gimmick, is to not be very bright, but this was just a complete and total botch. Anyway, because of that botch, Charlotte gets the win with the natural selection, and they can continue to beat down Paige, and holy shit, finally, after what seems like months of fans chanting, "We want Sasha," we have the return of Sasha Banks, the boss, comes in to wreck house, and then kind of stands tall with the belt, and then with Paige, which seemed weird. I don't know. I bet they'll have a tag match before they have that actual title match at, say, SummerSlam. That seems appropriate. Anyway, next segment was the Wyatts are back because Bray Wyatt is no longer injured. Now, it is the Wyatts minus Luke Harper because Luke Harper is still out with that knee injury. And this segment was weird because they got interrupted doing their usual Bray Wyatt spiel by the New Day. Now, normally, when you're the champions, you don't interrupt guys that, you are obviously going to end up in a feud with. Like, usually it is the champions who get interrupted, and then that's how you start your feud. So that's kind of backwards. I did like Xavier Woods kind of getting a little bit hypnotized by the Wyatts. Like, that was cool. But I'm not sure how I feel yet about this feud. Like, I'm trying to think, how many times during that original run of The Undertaker, where you were supposed to be taking The Undertaker as a very serious and scary threat, how many times did you have, like, a comedy mid-card guy kind of poking fun at The Undertaker? Did that actually happen that often? I can't really recall if that was ever a thing. But having the Wyatts, who should be taken seriously as a serious threat, being, having their gimmick poked fun at by the New Day, kind of might not work. I don't know. Like anything else, we'll see how it goes. So that was that. Another vignette with Bob Backlund and Darren Young. I don't know where these are going, but again, I still find Bob Backlund hilarious. Then there was this, which was Rusev and Titus. There was no match here. It was just literally a brawl. The bell never rung. It made both guys look pretty good, I thought. And made me a little bit more invested in whatever the hell this feud is. But I'm surprised that this feud isn't over and that they're not moving on Rusev to different things. After that, we had Miz and Maurice on set still at the Marine 5, which I think they're done with pretty soon. And if they're done, that means also who should be done would be the Social Outcasts and Naomi. So they should all be back on TV soon, hopefully. But yeah, this was, a somewhat amusing, on the set, Miz thinks he's a fucking big star thing. That was cool. We had kind of a pointless Jericho-Shane thing backstage. As much as I like Jericho, I didn't care for the fact that they kind of made Shane seem a bit like Steph here, where, he's kind of just, the top dog in the yard, super in charge, and you can't do anything to him. But I'm like, unlike Stephanie, who, never gets her comeuppance, Shane just fought Taker, so obviously he can get into matches. Not that he should be, I'm saying he can. Pump handle slam from Titus. Anyway, your main event was Roman Reigns, the now suspended Roman Reigns, versus Seth Rollins. Winner gets the right to fight Ambrose for the world title at Battleground. Spoiler! Double countout. Double countout, and that means that both men will fight Dean Ambrose. It will be a triple threat match, and you might be wondering, why would you do a triple threat match at Battleground, and why wouldn't you do it at SummerSlam? Obviously, a bigger show, SummerSlam. And the reason why, obviously, is the brand split. If they're planning on having these three individuals, even one of them is on a different show, then they wouldn't be able to fight at SummerSlam because they would have already been, in the brand split. But brand split happens a couple of days before. It's the same week as Battleground. So, obviously, there aren't different branded pay-per-views yet. So, you could theoretically have them fight, even though they've been split, at that one last pay-per-view match before the brand split happens. Now, my idea is that somehow Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins will both pin or both tap out Dean Ambrose, and they will both be champion. But since they got drafted on different shows, the belt has to get split in two, therefore 2 world titles. That's just me. That's just how I feel about it. That will make the most sense in terms of having 2 shows and 2 titles. Anyway, both men got a dirty deed at the end of this to run out the show. That was it. Notably here, there were no shining stars, thank God, and there was no Randy Orton. So when the hell is Randy Orton coming back? I've heard August, so I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I'm Attacked. Like, that was Raw. Let me know what you thought. Thanks for watching. More videos every day, and I will see you next time right here on this channel. Roman suspended, and I'm out.